Moody's Anecdotes and Illustrations. Related in his revival work by the great evangelist, Dwight L. Moody. This video contained various anecdotes. First anecdote. The fettered bird, freed. A friend in Ireland once met a little Irish boy who had caught a sparrow. The poor little bird was trembling in his hand, and seemed very anxious to escape. The gentleman begged the boy to let it go, as the bird could not do him any good, but the boy said he would not, for he had chased it 3 hours before he could catch it. He tried to reason it out with the boy, but in vain. At last he offered to buy the bird, the boy agreed to the price, and it was paid. Then the gentleman took the poor little thing and held it out on his hand. The boy had been holding it very fast, for the boy was stronger than the bird, just as Satan is stronger than we, and there it sat for a time, scarcely able to realize the fact that it had got liberty, but in a little while it flew away, chirping, as if to say to the gentleman, "Thank you. Thank you. You have redeemed me." That is what redemption is, buying back and setting free. So Christ came back to break the fetters of sin, to open the prison doors and set the sinner free. This is the good news, the gospel of Christ. Ye are not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, but with the precious blood of Christ. Next anecdote. Gold. The most solemn truth in the gospel is that, the only thing Christ left down here is his blood. A man who covers up the cross, though he may be an intellectual man, and draw large crowds, will have no life there, and his church will be but a gilded sepulchre. There is either of two things we must do. One is to send back the message to heaven, that we don't want the blood of Christ to cleanse us of our sin, or else accept it. Into every house where the blood was not sprinkled, the destroying angel came. But wherever the blood was on doorpost and lintel, whether they had worked much, or whether they had worked none, God passed them over. A man who has not realized what the blood has done for him has not the token of salvation. It is told of Julian, the apostate, that while he was fighting, he received an arrow in his side. He pulled it out, and, taking a handful of blood, threw it into the air and cried, "Galilean, Galilean, thou hast conquered." Look at that Roman soldier as he pushed his spear into the very heart of the God-man. What a hellish deed! But what was the next thing that took place? Blood covered the spear. Oh! Thank God, the blood covers sin. There was the blood covering that spear, the very point of it. The very crowning act of sin brought out the crowning act of love. The crowning act of wickedness was the crowning act of grace. It is said that old Dr. Alexander, of Princeton College, when a young student used to start out to preach, always gave them a piece of advice. The old man would stand with his gray locks and his venerable face and say, "Young man, make much of the blood in your ministry." Now, I have traveled considerable during the past few years, and never met a minister who made much of the blood and much of the atonement, but, God had blessed his ministry, and souls were born into the light by it. Next anecdote. Child stories. Little Moody. I remember when I was a boy, I went several miles from home with an elder brother. That seemed to me the longest visit of my life. It seemed that I was then further away from home, than I had ever been before, or have ever been since. While we were walking down the street we saw an old man coming toward us, and my brother said, "There is a man that will give you a cent. He gives every new boy that comes into this town a cent." That was my first visit to the town, and when the old man got opposite to us he looked around, and my brother, not wishing me to lose the cent, and to remind the old man that I had not received it, told him that I was a new boy in the town. The old man, taking off my hat, placed his trembling hand on my head, and told me I had a Father in heaven. It was a kind, simple act, but I feel the pressure of the old man's hand upon my head today. You don't know how much you may do by just speaking kindly. Next anecdote. Won by a smile. In London, in 1872, one Sunday morning a minister said to me, "I want you to notice that family there in one of the front seats. And when we go home I want to tell you their story." When we got home I asked him for the story, and he said, "All that family were won by a smile." "Why," said I, "how's that?" "Well," said he, "as I was walking down a street one day I saw a child at a window, it smiled, and I smiled, and we bowed. So it was the second time, I bowed, she bowed. It was not long before there was another child, and I had got in a habit of looking and bowing, and pretty soon the group grew, and at last, as I went by, a lady was with them. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to bow to her, but I knew the children expected it, and so I bowed to them all. And the mother saw I was a minister, because I carried a Bible every Sunday morning. So the children followed me the next Sunday and found I was a minister. And they thought I was the greatest preacher, and their parents must hear me. A minister who is kind to a child, and gives him a pat on the head, why the children will think, he is the greatest preacher in the world. Kindness goes a great way. And to make a long story short, the father and mother and 5 children were converted, and they are going to join our church next Sunday. Won to Christ by a smile. We must get the wrinkles out of our brows, and we must have smiling faces. Thanks.